There is no substitute for hard work. It's from something I learned since a very young age. The work ethic was like drilled into me. Everybody has their own path. There is no one way to do it. Sometimes I didn't have the confidence. And when we're embarking in something new, I had to work hard at overcoming the fear of doing something I had never done before. Everything we do has an aspect of leadership, and I think I definitely have worked very hard to always evolve in my leadership skills, and I definitely consider myself a leader.
Hola, amiga, and welcome to the Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast by Latinas for all women. So get ready because today's conversation is really special. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast. I'm Gracie, your co-host, and I'm here today with Judge Miriam Quinn. Miriam, we ask all of our guests to introduce themselves and let us know what you do. So who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so I am Miriam Quinn. That's my full name. I work at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. In one of the offices that we have here is the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, and I am one of 230 administrative patent judges currently instituted as judges for patents in the office.
Okay, and thank you for introducing yourself. And I actually have a few questions about how you earned your law degree and your, school journey. I know you earned a law degree from St. Thomas University School of Law and your Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering from Florida International University. What inspired you to pursue a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and how did your journey lead you to a law degree?
Yes. So I've always been interested in science and technology. I've always been a curious person, a learner. And I actually first wanted to be an aerospace engineer because in those days, the space shuttle was a big thing. This is like mid 1980s. I don't want to date myself, but that's how far back I made that decision. And I thought at some point I needed to be in the Air Force, which you hear things about what it takes to be in a certain career. But when I was looking into any of these opportunities, I grew up in Puerto Rico, and the universities there did not have those types of degrees. So looking for what I could do in the STEM field because I was really interested in math and science. I had other interests like, music. I played the guitar and things like that. But my parents were like, "There's no careers in that. You must go into something that will actually pay the bills." So at that point, I was aware of engineering because my father was an engineer as well, and he had gone to the engineering school in the University of Puerto Rico, and taught me what was there available for me. At that point, we were not considering moving out of Puerto Rico. So I thought, well, that is a versatile field. And there were a lot of things in the 80s that were becoming brand new, like, the computers we take for granted today were like brand new to us at that time. The ability to have a computer at home, cellular communications were just they were brand new at the time, and all of that had something to do with electrical engineering. And I thought, all of those things together have a lot of opportunity for me, and I thought that I would um, do well in that. So I started honing in on electrical engineering as the thing that I would do, and my father was very supportive, and I had good grades. So that's what I targeted. And then the family decided to all of us move to Miami, Florida. It was a um, very intense move because I spent my entire life with the same group of people. We all went to school together, we went to elementary school, we went to high school together. And suddenly I was starting brand new, and then I had to pivot and figure out where I wanted to go to school. And so I visited the campus at Florida International University, and And I felt like I fit in. I mean, Miami is a very strong Latin community. There's the majority of the students that I was with were Cuban American and Puerto Rican and other nationalities that I was familiar with. So I felt like I fit right in. And that's how I chose to be in that field. And I really never looked back. Um, as to how did I end up in law school, it's a little longer story because I actually practice engineering. I when I got out of engineering school, I decided to go in the area of telecommunications. Again, wireless communications were really big at the time, and lots of companies had interest in building portfolios in communications. So that's what I did for about 6 years. And my job at the time was a project manager, and I had to travel all over Latin America installing telecommunication systems in several areas. And at some point, the company was being sold. This were the days of a lot of venture capital, and so there was a lot of interest by the investors to recoup their capital. So there was an ending to this company, or it was going to be merged with something else. So that was a crossroads for me, and all of that also involved working with the lawyers of the company that were trying to put together a package to get capital and to evolve the company. And I became involved in that because I was by then director of engineering. And I ended up writing a lot of their documents. And I thought, my goodness, if I'm writing their documents and they're getting paid like twice what I get paid, I could do their job. I'm sure I could do their job. I never thought about being a lawyer, but that really planted a seed for me that it wasn't as mysterious or as complex as I had made it up to be in my mind. And I didn't have anyone in my family that was a lawyer, so I didn't have evidence that I could achieve that. But being exposed to that planted a seed in me. And then when the company finally did get through their financing round, we were all given the opportunity to take a package, and I did, and I immediately applied to law school. I took the LSAT like the week later. I didn't even know what the LSAT was. I just laughed for it. And thankfully, I did well at the school that I actually wanted to attend, St. Thomas University in Miami, Florida, as a Catholic university and a Catholic law school. And that really spoke to me. And they accepted me right away. And I said yes. And I never looked back on that. So that's how I ended up in law school.
That's amazing. I've always heard the LSAT's so hard to like pass, and you said you passed the first time?
Yeah, but it wasn't easy. I'm gonna say. I mean, I studied. I mean, I'm looking at this back like 20 some years ago. I wish I had studied more, but I mean, if the effort was to get into the school that I wanted to get in, I accomplished my goal. I didn't need a perfect score. I just needed to do well enough to get into the school I wanted.
And that's amazing. And I'm actually wondering, because I know there's different types of law that you can get into through law school. So
Yeah.
what, I guess, and what inspired you to go with patent law, like
Well,
that
I
route?
mean, yeah. So I already spent 6 7 years working in engineering. I wanted to use that experience. So I wanted to do something that took advantage of the degree I already had, and I could use that technical expertise. I actually liked engineering. It was very exciting. There was always something new. You're always problem solving. So I always liked that aspect of engineering. So I looked for what careers in law are in technology or do you use an engineering degree for? And I mean, the best thing I could do there was we didn't have internet at the time. I mean, you had AOL, which, you could go in, they had some databases. I could search for like, what do lawyers do with technology? And there were quite a few things. There was a lot of technology licensing at the time. And then you could work in the technology field as a lawyer, but it was mostly corporate law. But then something caught my attention. There was a directory of patent attorneys and where they lived. and there was a map of all the concentration of all the patent attorneys in the United States. It was an interesting database. I don't know how I got a hold of that, and that's what I started looking into. I thought, oh, there's such a thing as a lawyer who only does patents, and I was aware of patents because the company I was working for as an engineer had patents on the technology that we were working with. So I just started reading everything I could about it. I went to the library. I got some magazines that talked about law and the law practice. At the time, there were compendiums of law firms and what kinds of specialties they had, because each law firm had their own departments. And I wanted to see where the law firms were that could end up working with. And I realized that a lot of them were in Texas. And wanted to stay in Florida, but sadly, a lot of the patent lawyers there were there because they have retired and moved to Florida, not necessarily because they were actually working in Florida. So my husband's from Texas, so it was a natural migration for us to start a Texas life, and me looking into the field of patent law in Texas once I graduated.
And going into your career now as your role of lead administrative patent judge at the USPTO, can you tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Uh, yeah, it's very exciting career here at USPTO. The role of lead administrative patent judge has a lot of facets. I would say that the one of them that I enjoy tremendously is collaborating and working with other lead judges at the board. Um, we have a lot of administrative functions. We handle human resources training. We draft a lot of communications. We engage in meetings, a lot of analysis of statistics, following up with projects we may be having. Some of it has to do with, following up with the processes of making sure the cases are being handled timely. And sometimes we interact with other business units to interact with other parts of the office that we have common interests in, and also stakeholders, like doing outreach, education, and things like this, where we talk to the public about what we do. Another facet of my work is on handling actual cases. All of our cases are handled by a panel of three. So I interact with my colleagues as a judge who has a docket. We decide the cases, we write decisions that reflects the views of the panel. And that is also a very rewarding aspect of the job. And there is no typical day for me. I say I thrive in a constant change, and I like the variety. So some days I'm just doing cases, and I spent most of my day reading, comprehending, and analyzing, evaluating the case, and writing. And there are other days in which it's administration only. I'm in meetings all day, on my emails and following up on things. But one thing I do that I make sure I do is that I need to block time every day for when I have my writing work or my deep analysis work. I call it my deep work block. I make sure that I block that time so that I can make sure that I have a good balance with the work that I have to do at the office.
Yeah, and everyone has, their favorite part or their favorite thing that they do in their career or in their job. What's like your most, I know you mentioned your the most rewarding. What's your favorite part of your job?
The favorite part I have is definitely conferencing with my fellow colleagues. I work with a fabulous group of judges. I pinch myself that they are the best people I've ever worked with, and it's a joy to discuss the cases, decide the issues. We debate of what to do, and then eventually we get into the weeds of the case. We talk about the law, we talk about the facts. That's my favorite part of the case, of the work that I do here. I I love all of it, but if I had a favorite time of day when that happens, I look forward to that.
If you're all about education, going back to school, or you're currently navigating college right now, we have something very exciting to share. Our Latinas in Education is coming very soon. So be sure to follow us at Latina Leadership Podcast on our socials because we'll be updating and you can reserve your spot at our event.
Yeah, and for some listeners who may not be familiar with the Patent Trial and Appeal Board and the USPTO, could you explain its significance and the types of cases that it handles?
Sure. So so let me start by giving a little bit of a history about when I say the board. This started in the passage of the America Invents Act back in 2012. Many changes came because of that legislation and patent law and the USPTO. And one of those changes was to rename a board of judges that was there at the time. It was called the Board of Patent Appeals and Interferences. And then now it was changed to the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. So we call it PTAB for short. And now this board under the law was tasked to continue being the USPTO's primary patent tribunal. So it's a neutral body of judges that decide appeals and adjudicate trials. And we also call the trials contested cases. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. The America Invents Act also changed the nature of those trials that the board was conducting and how we were conducting them. So today we refer to our trials as AIA trials, short for America Invents Act, to distinguish them from trials we were already handling. So that's what the board is in general. So for those unfamiliar with trials, what we call contested cases, these are cases that begin when someone files a petition alleging that the patent that the office issued that needs to be reevaluated. And we call them contested cases because we have a petitioner who is challenging the patent, and we also have the owner of the patent engaging together as adversaries, as they do in usual court matters. So in other words, these two parties, each one is advocating that the law and facts are on their side. So we review all the arguments presented. We review the record that they develop over the course of the case. It's about a year for these cases to work themselves out. And then in the end, we issue a final decision, a final written decision. If the trial was granted and the matter is still pending, we issue that decision. So that's one type of case. And then another type of cases, which actually is the majority of the work that the board does, is on deciding appeals. And appeals are requests that patent applicants make to the board. And they ask the board to review the rejection of their application for patent. So if you know what the patent office does is the patent office reviews patent applications and grants patents. Um, so we review the requests when they're filed and the rejection, along with all the evidence of record again, and we determine, based on all of that, whether the office committed an error in rejecting the application, and then the board issues a decision, and that decision becomes a decision on appeal. So depending on that decision of the board, the office could issue the patent, or it may continue the evaluation according to what the applicant wants to do with that application, or and based on the decision that we issue. But in all cases, and something a lot of people don't know, is that there is an opportunity for a hearing in every single case, that the judges can hear oral arguments before deliberating on a final determination. And I'll say that as far as the significance of the board, the PTAB, as I said, I work with a remarkable group of, it's about 230 judges, and we work very, very hard to discharge our judicial duties impartially and professionally, with the utmost excellence. I mean, the work that my colleagues do is amazing. And we have a mission that is by statute to, we're very dedicated to ensuring that no matter whether we're handling appeals or trials, that our decisions reflect our commitment to promoting the integrity of the United States patent system.
And for someone who, like the applicants who go through this, how long do the cases usually last?
Well, it varies because so we have deadlines for trials. So those cases have a set beginning. It begins with the filing of the petition. And then once we decide to move ahead with the trial, we have a set deadline by which they need to be completed. And those trials have to be completed within the year of instituting a trial. So we have a docket that's pretty fast paced on those cases. For appeals, we wait until the appeal is docketed on our dockets. And from there on, our average pendency is about 12 months to 13 months, depending on the technology. So within the year, you get to know the decision on the appeal from the patent application, the rejection.
And I do have a question about being a Latina in patent law or as a judge. Have you encountered any challenges? And if you have, how have you navigated them?
Well, I have to say that I don't recall any challenge specific to being Latina per se. I don't look at the world from that lens. I mean, I grew up in a homogeneous household in Puerto Rico. We were all Hispanic. We were all Puerto Rican. And then living in Miami, we were all, just of the same background. I didn't perceive any differences. And what I did experience was a difference of treatment because of gender. And at the time, the law firm landscape was very different from what it was today. I'm talking, very early 2000s. I was aware that there were opportunities that were not open to me because of gender. And what I did was I really just tried to look for whatever other opportunity was out there that I was interested in, that I didn't see evidence of a barrier. I would go for it. I would just try to work hard and prove that my gender, if that was an issue, was not going to be an impediment to getting a good outcome in any case that I was involved in.
Yeah, and I love speaking to people like you, women in leadership positions, because it is growing, seeing women as leaders.
It is.
So, were there mentors or anybody you looked up to who guided you or inspired you along your journey?
Yes, and I was going to say that one of the saddest things I had growing up was that I didn't have a mentor that was a female, a woman in the position that I am today that could inspire me to be where I am today. But I did have mentors the first mentor that I had was my father. I mean, he was able to, while he was a disciplinarian, he was strict. I've spoken to a lot of other friends of mine from the same kind of background, and we all had kind of disciplinarian parents. But the one thing he taught me that has served me all my life was time management. And he was an avid time blocker, even from like back in the 80s. So I've carried that with me all my life, and it served me well. And there were other later mentors. They were more situational mentors. Like I knew I had to get more comfortable with being in social situations. I was always the young one in the room in engineering. I was like a 20-year-old, and everybody else in the room was a lot older than I was. And they were all in sales, and I was the only engineer. So there were like differences in how we related to people, and I was more introverted. So I looked for people that would help me come out of my shell and be more social and interact with others, and also to cultivate a curiosity for knowing people and what they're interested in. Obviously, that's the sales kind of thing. You always want to know what your potential lead need so that you can match their need with a product. So they were trying to teach me like their sales kind of a way of being. But I got from that a lot of confidence in that everyone is just relating as people, and that people were not as scary as they seem to be in working situations where you walk into a room and you don't know anybody. So I look for mentors in that way. And there was somebody in the company when I was a young engineer that helped me with that. And it just seemed that I was more at ease when I was around someone who understood that I had difficulties in like coming out of my shell and just looking at my shoes and wondering, oh, what time is this event over so that I can go home and watch my cop shows. Uh, Also, last but not least, I had fabulous partner at the law firm who was my champion, and he would come in and give me like mini lectures at the end of the day, and I would look at the clock and think, it's 6 o'clock. I need to go home. I have a baby at home, and he would be like, yeah, yeah, but I need to tell you this. And so we would chat for, it was an interesting chat, but he would teach me things that how to look at the world in a way that makes sense for the business people, and like how to dissect a problem and how to get the best out of the team. And that's advice that I use still today. So I'm deeply grateful that I had those interactions with those folks that I looked up to, and I learned a lot from them.
And speaking on advice, now that it's years later in your career, what advice or what advice do you have for people maybe going into patent law or some career similar to that?
Well, I mean, my advice is obviously if that's what you want, go for it. And there is no substitute for hard work. As from something I learned since a very young age, the work ethic was like drilled into me. And I, there are ways to do it. Everybody has their own path. There is no one way to do it. And obviously, the times have changed since I went through it. But one of the things that I had is I remember, and this is going to sound corny, but one of the things I remember was the movie The Field of Dreams had like this little "if you build it, they will come" kind of motto, and I latched onto that because when I was in my early stages of my career, wondering, if I had the confidence to do this as a young person in a field where so many were very seasoned, that sometimes I didn't have the confidence. And when we're embarking in something new, I had to work hard at overcoming the fear of doing something I had never done before, and something that I still do today. I mean, I don't repeat over and over, "If you build it, they will come." But the mantra here is that sometimes you just have to act and build it and go with that idea or that vision, and the confidence follows. Your supporters will be there. Your champions will arise. You'll start noticing that things are working. And maybe you have to pivot and change, but for sometimes the action comes before the confidence. And that's something that I do still today. Um, I mean, and lastly, I would say, like, my grandmother used to say in Spanish, "This too shall pass." And it's always a reminder to me that nothing is permanent. Change is inevitable. There's always going to be something that we need to adapt to. And I have learned over my decades of working that you just have to look at change as an opportunity and look for the lessons there and growth, because when one door closes, another one opens. And that coupled with the confidence to tackle it, I think we can do anything we set our minds to.
Yeah, as someone young in my career, that's actually really inspiring when you said action comes before confidence. I've been learning a lot of that now that I'm just graduating, being in a career like this one.
Yeah,
And we have a question that we ask all of our guests, and it's, do you consider yourself a leader?
Absolutely. I think it's hard to like, pat ourselves in the back sometimes. But yes, I mean, we are leaders in there are leaders in every facet of our lives. We're leaders at home, we're leaders in our at church, we're leaders at work with our siblings. I was the oldest of five, so I had to be the leader sometimes, not the babysitting kind, but like we leading by example. Everything we do has an aspect of leadership. And I think I definitely have worked very hard to always evolve in my leadership skills. And I definitely consider myself a leader.
I'm also the youngest. I mean, the oldest. I'm sorry. I'm the oldest of four sisters.
Oh, wow. Yes. Okay. I mean, we were five. I was the oldest of all of them, but we had three girls and two boys, and the boys are the babies. So they got away with murder.
No, yeah, the youngest is always spoiled in their little ways
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Um, I actually have another question. So, what changes or advancements do you hope to see in the fields of intellectual property law?
Yeah. So that's difficult to answer, and I would say in my position, I'm a civil servant, so a servant leader in my organization. So I mostly rely on Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Federal Circuit. Those are the courts and the legislative bodies that set and interpret the laws of the United States, and the boards and the things that I have to follow and do in my job. So it may be difficult to predict any kind of change or where things may be going, or you know, I, trying to think about what I could hope for as any change. But I would say that regardless of what comes down, one of the things that I focus is to make sure that I create an impact in the field by teaching and developing the next generation of lawyers and judges. There's nothing like being adaptable and resilient in when it comes to change. So whatever that may be, I just hope that I can be um, a, a source of information, a source of inspiration, a source of mentoring, because change is inevitable, and I think our ability to navigate the changes will determine how we thrive. And I would love for the next generation to thrive and move up. And succession planning is a big thing for me. So one day I will pass it on to those that come behind me, and they will rise.
And Miriam, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share with our audience today?
I would say that to anyone and everybody, follow your dreams and don't give up on them.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Latina Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for joining us in this amazing conversation today. And if you need more information or resources, as always, they'll be in the description below. Please don't forget to follow us everywhere at Latina Leadership Podcast to stay updated with our latest releases, events, updates, and more. And with that, we'll see you next time.